These are the 5 main tips I use for my wood burnings. Starting from left to right, we have the writer's tip, the shader tip, the small heavy shader tip, the ballpoint tip, and the small point tip. Alright, so I'm starting off with the writer's tip. Obviously, it's used for writing. For this technique to work, you must make sure that your preferred piece of wood is sanded with a high grit sandpaper for a much smoother surface. And doing that step, it helps the pen glide so much easier. So I started learning calligraphy about 2 years ago. It's something I've always been fascinated in, is like lettering and graffiti. I went through quite a few notebooks just writing different words, and I'd ask my wife to give me a word, give me a sentence to write, and I just practice it. I was one of those people that always said, I wish I could write like that, and here I am today. I learned it. I'm still learning. There's always room for improvement no matter how good you think you are. Art has infinite possibilities. And I had no doubt in my mind that I would learn this. If you all are interested in learning calligraphy, I actually have a few tutorials on my channel, so feel free to check them out. You can also use a writer's tip to shade. That's typically what I do instead of the shader. I don't know. This has always been the easiest way for me, like going in small circles, and I just get, I guess, a more even shade by doing this. But yeah, small circular motions. To make the shade darker, just go back over it, add another layer. The more layers, the darker it'll get. And you can even do the stipple effect. That's pretty fun with this one. It doesn't leave a perfectly round burn. It's kind of like an oval. I don't know, like an oval, I guess. But it works. Makes a really cool texture. Dude, even using this tip for like line work and stuff, it's so fun. It glides so easy, especially if the wood is sanded. That's one of the main keys, is sanding your piece of wood before you burn. You can even use it for doing textures and stuff. Fur, grass, like I'm doing here. You can do whatever you want to do. But for real though, like, art has no limitations. There's infinite possibilities out there for this stuff. So much fun, yeah. Next, I'm going to be using the shader tip. You can use this for line work as well. I'm drawing a line to keep them separated. That way you know which tip was for what. Here's a little shading example. Also going in small circular motions. Alright, you can also use the shader tip for the grass texture as well. I enjoy using this tip just for that reason. Doing this technique, I'll turn my pen on its side and I'll literally use the tip of the shader to make this texture. This also works well for if you're doing line work. You can hit the curves really easy. The trick is to kind of twist the pen. If you can see my hand kind of twisting a little bit. Even shading in dark areas. This is another way to shade too. Just kind of pulling it towards you and letting loose. Alright, now we're going to do the small heavy shader. You can pretty much do the same thing with this tip as the shader tip above. It's just smaller and doesn't have that big gap in the middle. Another one of my favorite tips is the ballpoint tip. You can also use this for line work, which I want to be drawing another line burning another line to separate the burns. This works really well when stippling, especially if you have a dark background and you don't want to use a shader tip for just a plain background. You can use this for the texture of it, and the outcome's really awesome. I'm gonna go ahead and throw some shade in here. You can do this the same way as the shader tip. I actually have a shading video. I'll have that in the description. But yeah, small circles. If you want it darker, just add another layer. This works extremely well for writing. Most of my little clips, I use this tip for writing. I also use this for line work. It just glides so easily. Alright, the last tip I'm using is a small point tip. Mainly for line work, using this tip, it's better for straight lines. I mean, it's kind of hard to curve it with this tip. I mean, you can do shading with it, especially like fine detail work. And obviously textures.